made of wood planking.
My research and presentation, he allows me. You'll notice the ramp you're standing on is almost horizontal because in 40 minutes, high tide in the bay will be reached. The distance between high tide and low tide is 9.5 feet in these waters. If you missed it last night, be sure tonight to look around 8 p.m. in the sky and you'll see a gigantic super blue moon. Welcome aboard the Spirit of San Diego sailors for our North Bay cruise. Welcome aboard! Maritime Museum, which is only minutes on foot from our Broadway pier, is a ferry boat called the Berkeley, painted bright white. It too is historical valid because it saved many souls in the Bay of San Francisco in 1906 during the Great Earthquake. It's now our Maritime Museum. At the museum are also replicas of Her Majesty's Navy of the 1800s, a replica of the first ship that came into these waters in the 1500s. Also, there is a submarine at the Maritime Museum. Behind the Berkeley on the land is a light tan building with a tower at its center. That's a historical landmark. It's the original county building of San Diego, California. That was completed just years after the Empire State Building was completed, which at that time was the tallest building in the world. At that same time, this building off our starboard was considered on the west coast of this country as a skyscraper. It was so tall. People came from miles around to gawk at it. It was so tall. Of the tanks to hold 450 gallons of aircraft fuel. Basically, a miniature bomb with wings. Proud recertified snacktician. He's at the concession stand, and by the way, if you're not interested in food and beverage, you might like to know where the heads are located on this vessel. The heads are on either side of that concession stand. The women's heads are on the starboard side, the men's heads are on the port side. Heads, I believe, on land are called toilets or urinals. In the shape of this bay, if you'll kindly look off our starboard, there is the Hilton Hotel on Harbor Island. While looking at that hotel, we are looking due north towards the North Pole. And while looking in that direction, imagine, please, a skinny, long question mark in the shape of the Bay of San Diego. And at the moment, imagine our captain piloting this vessel, our eyes being for dolphins in the water. I also keep look out for mermaids. The water is very calm today, so we might see some inland shore dolphins. I can't promise that, but I'm quite confident we'll see some California sea lions up ahead. Off our starboard beam at the west end of Harbor Island is a tan building with a red tile roof. Look on the roof and you'll see a mini lighthouse. Tom, after completing the construction of his restaurant, slung a cable, a light bulb on it, and switched it on to attract sailors to his new restaurant and dinner for night. The Coast Guard saw the light and realized they were a little late and had intended to put a navigation lane on the west end of that artificial island. They put it on his roof. That's known locally as Tom Ham's Lighthouse Restaurant, and Tom is the only citizen of the state that has a navigation lane on his business building. He turns that navigation lane on every night to guide sailors around the bay waters. So they told their engineer John Bates to remove it. There was no place to put it all, so he convinced the city to use it. They moved that sand and silt a bit west, flattened it, landscaped it, gave it a Polynesian tropical theme to attract restaurants and hotels. They created the first artificial island on the west coast of California for recreational boaters, shelter island. It too is about a mile long and a few hundred yards deep, with thousands of recreational boats tied up within. Off our starboard, we're passing the newest public pier. This one made of concrete and steel, the other are made of wood. This one also has a launch ramp. I mentioned our public piers, not very scenic, but a lot of San Diegans don't know this, I didn't. You can stand on any of our public piers around the bay and fish for free. You don't need a license. If you see someone on a pier fishing, they're going to pull up some of dozens of species of fish that can be cleaned, pan-fried, and eaten for meals for free if caught on any of our public piers. This is one of the few sandy beaches around the bay. This one's popular at night because it has rings in which you can build bonfires. as you notice, as we pass the bay shore of Shelter Island, behind it, we're paralleling a steep hill upon which are two of the most luxurious neighborhoods in downtown San Diego. Those neighborhoods are Roseville and La Playa. La Playa is the Spanish word for the English word the beach. La Playa, se dice en inglés, the beach. 2 o'clock off our starboard on the ridge of that steep hill, there is a terracotta colored mansion amongst a garden of palm trees. A beautiful home built for one of the city's aviation pioneers, Mr. Reuben Fleet. As a young inventor, he began his career building and manufacturing airplanes in Buffalo, New York. Packed up and moved his team west and settled in San Diego, California. He was one of the first to buy property on that steep hill. And that beautiful home was finished for his family about the same time as the Empire State Building. San Diegans instantly called it their Spanish castle, which we still call today. General Reuben H. Fleet, best known for building the B-24 Liberator bomber for the World War II effort. Along the West Coast in factories, half of those factory workers had a nickname. Their nickname was Rosie the Riveter. American females stayed home on the domestic home front and built the hardware that their men used to fight in the water, on the land, in the sky with our allies to, thank God, win World War II. There's a dolphin off our starboard at 2 o'clock. There's a biologist training a dolphin. Deadly San Diegans, if you ever see an inflatable about that length, but it has a triangular shaped pup tent on it, you can assume that in that pup tent is a dolphin that belongs to the United States Navy. States Navy's dolphins are taught to use their sonar sensors to become underwater detectives for the Navy. Sent out to find objects or even scout ships that have been thought to be tampered with. Here's a naval training vessel that's training California sea lions off our starboard. You can see the Oscar flag, the orange and white striped flag, signaling someone's in the water, but in this case on purpose, and the someone is a mammal called the California sea lion. If you look off our starboard beam on the shoreline, you'll see a light battleship gray building with a row of mirrored windows. That's an admin and laboratory of the Navy. To the left of that building, in the water along the shoreline, are floating wooden corrals. In those corrals are the Navy's bottlenose dolphins. The English word, the hill. La Loma, se dice en inglés, the hill. We're now approaching one of the 4 naval bases around the Bay of San Diego. We're heading for a very highly secure military installation called Naval Base Point Loma. The first naval base is off our starboard beam. This is a concrete refueling dock that military and commercial vessels tie up to take on fuel from those large white fuel tanks at the foot of La Loma. Excuse me. 2 bells for each hour, 1 bell for each half, 8 bells at 12 o'clock, 1600, and 2000. Captain Kinsella has dropped the throttle, slowed the propellers, and thankfully has time to pass slowly up our starboard a row of connected wooden bait barges. In these barges below are baskets of live bait that are bought and used by deep-sea fishermen. When the bait is scooped with nets and tossed into the fishing boats, they use like elbows to crawl up onto flat, round surfaces. The dark chocolate brown bulls can weigh 1/2 ton. Their mates, the cows, are light tanned. are pregnant early in the year and birth them in June and July. These are wet puppy dogs. They're easy to train. Feed them a fish and they'll gladly learn a trick. These are some of the performers at our SeaWorld. The patient birds here, waiting for bait to slop over into the water, are cormorants, snow egrets, varieties of seagulls, and the long-necked, long-beaked brown pelican. More efficient than his belly can. Fish in his beak for a week and a week. Nobody really knows how the hell he can. This vessel off our starboard at the de-lousing lane is a ship that replenished others at sea. It's called an oiler with its 8 fuel pumps on the open air deck. On the bow, it's number 207. That is the 207th oiler of the United States Navy. That was named after our honorable congressman by the name of Earl Warren. He was also known for having written the report to research the assassination of John F. Kennedy. His report was called the Warren Commission. As we leave the bait barges, we're now continuing on to our destination. Off our starboard side is Naval Base Point Loma, where 22,000 Navy personnel and government employees work during the work week. And here is where 4 of the Navy's Los Angeles-class nuclear-powered submarines tie up when at their home port. No submarines here today, unfortunately, although I believe there's one up out of the water being repaired in the Battleship Gray U-shaped dry dock up ahead. The submarine you see up out of the water under repair is covered with a tarp at its stern. It's covering the top secret design of its propeller. Up ahead is a building that looks a lot like a twin to Tom Ham's Lighthouse restaurant. Same architecture, however, this is a military building. The Coast Guard station at the mouth of the bay. One of the patrol boats of the Coast Guard is tied up at the pier. This building off our starboard at 1 o'clock is on an oval beach covered in cobblestones. Those cobblestones came from ports of call from around the world. Cobblestones were used when ships were made of wood to ballast or balance a ship made of wood. They would load or unload their cobblestones here at the mouth of the bay. More importantly, however, on this very beach off our starboard is where the first European explorer stood on the west coast of this continent. In the year 1542, Captain Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo stood on that beach, claimed all the land and sea he saw for King Carlos I of Spain, and gave these waters its first name. He wrote on his chart, La Bahía de San Miguel, to honor the angel who spoke to Moses in the Bible. Captain Cabrillo's namesake is on the summit of that peninsula. You can see the conical top of the old Point Loma lighthouse. It's one of the exhibition halls at Cabrillo National Monument, which is second in popularity only to the monument called the Statue of Liberty. And there, sailors, is our destination. Off our starboard beam, 6.1 miles from our eyeballs, is the horizon line over which is the largest geographical feature on the planet Earth, the Pacific Ocean, named Mar Pacificum by Captain Magellan in the year 1522. In the distance through the haze, as we make our turn, you can see the silhouetted outline of a coastal mountain range. Upon that slope is the fourth largest city of our neighboring country, Mexico. That is El Ciudad de Tijuana in el estado de Baja California. Military Cemetery. The cemetery was originally founded in the year 1882. It was one of the first army bases on the west coast of America. His sister Catherine and his older brother Wilbur and the other crew members in their wool coats and their wool caps, huddling together in the freezing cold, watched him fly their new machine above the ground for 120 feet for 12 seconds. The first North American to do so. They were the first on this continent to fly a machine in the air. This is the Bravo Pier at which naval ships tie up and take on munitions. This is a sea tractor tugboat. San Diegans, neighbors, if you ever see such a tugboat painted tan and orange, you can assure yourself that you're going to see a naval ship in these waters. This is the kind of tugboat that assists the Navy when in the Bay of San Diego. A handful of years after the Wright brothers flew the first heavy air machine above the ground on this continent, another crazy North American, building bicycles in his shop in Hammondsport, New York, closed that shop to study at a laboratory where, among other things, the telephone had been invented by Alexander Graham Bell. He listened to scientists lecture about how to build flying machines, took his notes home, sold his bicycle shop, packed his bags, and left the East Coast and traveled west, eventually settling in San Diego, California, when in 1911 Mr. Glenn Curtis leased property on Coronado, North Island, and opened the first aviation school on the west coast of America. Times have changed. Coming into view, F-18 Hornet supersonic jets, an Osprey, and a cargo plane helicopter of the Marine Corps. An airplane, teach you how to fly it, and certify you as a pilot if you were to give him $500 cash. And while he was teaching citizens who had that kind of money, the Army and Navy had small bases off our starboard side. Naval officers helped him build his planes and began using his designs for their own experiments. The Navy became so satisfied, they sent an officer on a train from San Diego eastbound to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. That officer's assignment? He was to, while wearing a full dress uniform, stand in front of Congress and read a speech on behalf of the Navy's experiments. They were impressed. They voted aye and agreed to buy all 1,200 acres of Coronado North Island in San Diego, California, on the other side of the countryside unseen, to fund the Navy's continued experiments with heavier-than-air machines. The naval base began modestly. 3 naval officers, 7 mechanic pilots building 3 hydroplanes, all living together in pup tents off our starboard side, birthplace of the Bros at that time were also in Long Beach, California, San Francisco, California, and Seattle, Washington. This was the Pacific Fleet headquarters until the Department of Defense convinced the Navy to move many of their warships from Battleship Row in the Bay of San Diego to a harbor on the south shore of a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Oahu, thereby making Pearl Harbor the Pacific Fleet headquarters. Unfortunately, it was not so for very long because, as you know, others found out about that move and they surprise attacked the hell out of it on a Sunday morning on what the president called on the radio the Day of Infamy. And on that day, untied from one of these mooring docks off our starboard, was the Navy's USS Washington. Left the bay and headed directly to that island to help those poor sailors. And that ship, as well as others, engaged the United States of America in joining the Allies to fight and, thank God, win World War II. Model, and although the new model is a little more difficult to refuel mid-air, according to an aviation mechanic, they can essentially fly forever. The only limit of distance of such a helicopter is the physical endurance of the crew of 4 on board. Earlier, sailors, I asked you to use your imagination to envision the question mark shape of the Bay of San Diego. Up ahead, please use your imagination once again. You'll notice on the shoreline a bright white cube-shaped building, a simulation facility for pilots to practice. In front of it is a truck on a launch ramp. That launch ramp today is made of steel and concrete, but it was built over a century ago, made of wood planking. Imagine this, sailors. Then aviation pioneer Glenn Curtis and some of his first nervous students, naval officers, bringing their handmade airplanes into these waters. Here, sailors, is where the first military officers took off, landed, and crashed the first military airplanes in the Bay of San Diego. cell allows me to represent the crew, and on behalf of my co-workers as deckhands, on behalf of their work duty as well as my research and presentation, he allows me to accept cash tips from you sailors. My name is Max with an X. This is my 315th day on board this vessel, and this was my 2,110th one-hour cruise. Thanks for listening to me babble. Have a sensational day in America's finest city, San Diego, California. Fair winds and following seas, amigos. Muchas gracias. Thank you for listening.